So let's get started with just a little bit of background as to how you got involved with this specific search, and start us off there, right at the beginning.
Yeah, so I have been off and on looking for Coronado in this region for, 20, 40 years. I think all archaeologists who are out in the field hope they'd run across evidence of Coronado. But in earnest, I'd been looking for about 20 years. I went to museums, I looked at artifacts that other archaeologists had found, and really would spend, 2 to 5 days a year looking and ruling places out. Unfortunately, that's all it did, was rule places out. And then all of a sudden, during COVID, July 2020, I found the first real hints, and it's been just site after site since then. And amazing implications of what we're finding. So it's just been a real fun journey, really, and it's still going on.
Absolutely. So that leads me to my next question. When we talk about the implications of what has been found, let's dig into that. What do we now know because of what you and some of your partners have found?
So what we found really has so many new interpretations and implications. So probably most important from the standpoint of changing history, it's hard to pick, but the fact that Coronado had, and his whole expedition through the whole 1539 to 1542 period, had so much interaction with the Otham, whose descendants live here today. And so this really enhances and changes their history. And so for me, that's the most important thing. And for them, that's the most important thing. On top of that, from the standpoint of changing history, having the first European settlement in this region and in the West is really important. And it's also like number 3 in the nation. So it's earlier than Roanoke, it's earlier than Jamestown, it's even earlier than St. Augustine. So the first 2, as far as I know, have not been found. We just know that they intended to establish them. This one is, as far as I know, the first one that's been found, and we're continuing to gather evidence to show that it was intended to be a long-term permanent settlement. So, and then other implications, I guess, it's the first, at this site, we have the first successful Native American uprising in the continental U.S. And the reason I say it that way is nobody came back for 150 years. And there were battles in the southeast against Soto and so on, but Europeans kept coming. And here in Arizona, nobody came for 150 years from the standpoint of Europeans. No Europeans came for 150 years. So that's a pretty big deal. They were good warriors, fierce warriors, and they made a point. And then on top of that, one of our other sites, which is Chilticothe, and another article will be coming out probably, I think it's January, in American Antiquity, our flagship journal for our profession, a peer-reviewed journal. That place, I found Chilticothe, and it has evidence of a battle in the archaeological record that was not recorded in the documents, except that there's one passage in the document that hints at it, that where Cortez is telling the king that he should get to do this expedition because when Diaz came up, 12 horsemen died, and basically Coronado and Viceroy Mendoza are incompetent, and I need to be the one to do this. Well, that's corroborative evidence that supports what the archaeology is telling us. So, yeah, so we have a lot of firsts. That's just some of the firsts and some of the most important implications of what we found. Plus the first firearm, in the first Coronado firearm, the earliest known firearm in the continental U.S. And we don't know for sure regarding the whole continent, but it looks like it's the earliest one known on the continental landmass. Now, there are some in the waters, but they're kind of a jumble, and I think people are starting to sort those out. That's why I'm being a little, I don't want to take anybody's glory away, but anyway, at least in the continental U.S., it's the earliest, and it's the first Coronado firearm known, found, you know.
Take me back to the day, the moment when you realized what you had come upon, and what you remember and will probably always remember of that day.
Well, I started digging on the Cascabel end, and I thought at first I had a bell. Not at first. I didn't realize it was anything that big. And then when I started digging down and realized that it looked like it was bronze or similar, I thought maybe it was a bell because of the nature of that Cascabel. And then I called the other archaeologist who was out with me that day, and we ended up spending the rest of the day figuring out that it was longer and bigger and more important. And at some point while we were digging it, after we hadn't gotten it out because we were waiting for somebody to bring a saw, a electric saw, so we could saw the roots out. While we were sitting there, we kept digging a little bit, and then we stopped, and I said, we need to stop and just take this moment in, because this is so important. We will never find anything as important and unique in our careers. And so it's important for us as individuals just to take this moment in, but also it's important to history. And we realized how important it was to history. We didn't understand what kind of gun it was or whatever, but we knew that it was unique. And so we knew that people were going to focus on it. They were going to imprint on it. It's an excellent way to connect with the past. Even my O'odham friends, we've had the O'odham out to the site a lot, and even though it was used against their ancestors, they still enjoy touching it and interacting with it and seeing it at the site to help them bring to life what their ancestors went through, and to kind of bring that period to the fore, to kind of help make it more real, and that's what that artifact does. It's important for so many reasons. I mean, the gun people just love it. I mean, it's just like they're drooling over it. But basically, from the standpoint of being a connection to the past, it's just really a phenomenal piece.
Yeah, it's tangible now.
It is.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's crude enough. It's kind of crude, and in that crudeness, it makes it all the more, it just reveals the past so much more.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. If you were to think about, what you want people to take away about what this time period was like on this ground that we now walk on, and what was going on at that time, what are the big takeaways that you want people to have when they're learning about Coronado?
Well, this was the first contact between Europeans and Native Americans in this area. That's an important period from the standpoint is not a lot is known. We have a lot of imagination about it, but projects like this and finds like this really help us understand the day-to-day kind of nitty-gritty. And the thing that strikes me about what this project is bringing out is that some of the things that we hear about that happened with Columbus and with the conquistadors in central Mexico, the brutality, I knew some of that occurred up here, but I had no idea that the full range of things occurred up here. And here I am, an archaeologist and historian, and it's really, now that we know where these named places are on the ground, we can actually connect the history, the documents, to those places and to the descendant populations. And there's a story I tell, this is an example of that. There's a story I tell. We found a dog's tooth, a big dog. And we know that the Spaniards had 200-pound mastiffs and lightning-fast greyhounds. And I was kind of shocked that we found this because I didn't know there were dogs here. I knew that the Coronado expedition had them. But, you know, these dogs, one dog was equal to 10 soldiers, and the dogs would tear human beings apart. The Spaniards had this practice where they would send the dogs running after and just attacking and tearing people to shreds. And I can't tell more of the story because it makes me cry, but basically they fed humans to dogs, you know, and just horrid things. Some of these people, you know, I gave a talk this last weekend and actually yesterday as well in a class, and I said, you know, some of these Spaniards were just cruel, unethical, amoral, you know, just vicious, and other ones were not. And I think that's the message here in part, because even when the subipriatum, who are being treated poorly by the Europeans in this area, they did not attack and kill everybody. They mostly did, but they let some people live. And that shows the humanity of this, you know. Before the attack, half the population left, and it's my theory that one of the reasons they left, it said that they mutinied because they were supposed to stay. I think they left because they were moral, and they saw what the captain was doing, cutting off hands, noses, and tongues, raping the women, you know, taking more than 2/3 of the share of food. And I think that those half of Spaniards that left just said, no, we're not doing this. So what I'm trying to do is bring out the personalities and bring out the people and show that, you know, we have the history, and the archaeology helps augment that, and sometimes the historical record helps augment the archaeology. So both can be very strong in certain ways, but we're learning new things, and we can also learn about human behavior and recognize that, yes, the conquest was terrible, you know, and some people would question whether they were conquistadors. In fact, they didn't really, you know, take over anything. But the fact is that this was a horrible experience for the natives in this area, and it really did change things, and there's no way to excuse it, but also not all the Spaniards were horrible. And just like, you know, those who rebelled in, you know, in Europe during, you know, World War II and so on, those who went underground and helped Jews escape and so on, and Poles and, you know, gypsies and so on. Not everybody should be classified the same. And this is what this story is telling me, that we need to think about our current situation, current way we think about ourselves and about our world, and understand that this is not the first time we've done this, and we really need to use history. We have an opportunity here to use history for some introspection.
Certainly. Is there anything else that you want to add? And then we can take a little bit of time to talk about the piece itself.
Well, I think when I found the cannon, I knew that this project was much bigger than myself. When I found the first artifacts on the site, I knew the project was much bigger than myself or an academic paper here and there. And that's why we, shortly after I found the cannon, I found a professional filmmaker to document our work. And that came out with the film Coronado, The New Evidence, which is now on PBS. But we're trying to do a second episode or more. We have so much material. And if we could do one additional episode or many, which we have planned, we could tell more of this story. And it's such an important story. And we just need funding, you know, private funding, basically. So we're hoping that that'll come through. So
we will be sure to include that as well on our website.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Yeah,
because she's working for half her rate. Her people are working for the nonprofit rate, and sometimes they don't get paid. But you know, so I don't get paid for what I do either. So we're doing this is a labor of love. But she needs to pay her people. You know, it's like you know, she's got to pay her camera people and sound people. So.